here without really talking about the whole slavery issue and what exactly happened during that time. All right. So where do we start? We start off in Rome, way back at the beginning of the 1st or 2nd century. All right. And the ancient Roman Empire really were the ones who established this chattel slavery system. Okay. In fact, the Roman Empire in 1117 AD extended all the way from the Iberian Peninsula up across Europe, across the Middle East, and all the way across the top of North Africa, including places like, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, and so on, Libya and Egypt. Okay. However, around 476 AD, the Roman Empire basically ceased to exist. Well, it did exist in the East, right? But they couldn't enforce their control over people. All right. So the system of chattel slavery really continued, really, in the Iberian Peninsula, that's Spain and Portugal, in the West, okay, and in the Ottoman Empire as well. All right. So that generally gives you a good context of where the thing started. All right. Now, the thing is, for most of the time, really, African slavery did exist in Africa in some form, fashion. Okay. It was prevalent, for many centuries before the Atlantic slave trade, right? However, slavery, okay, or people were enslaved through warfare. Okay, so one group of people fighting another group of people, and the prisoners who were taken would generally be enslaved, either sold to other people or kept, within the community itself. All right. They were sold to states in Africa or in Europe sometimes, or in Asia. Okay. There was no concept of a prison system. So they didn't keep people as prisoners, right? They sold them or they kept them for their own purposes. All right. The nature of that slavery, however, was fundamentally different, and I'll talk about that in a second. Now, the Arabs, okay, along the east coast of the continent, okay, carried on a slave trade for much longer than the Atlantic slave trade on the western side. In fact, they carried it on for over 1,000 years, from the 9th century to the 19th century. Okay. Basically, they established a whole heap of trade routes to Europe, to Asia even. Okay, they took people to Asia, to the Middle East, and to South Africa. Okay, all in all, and there's some argument as to what the numbers are. Okay, but it's estimated that around 9.5 to 17 million people were taken from the East African area, okay, to these various places. Interestingly, they were taken to be used as field workers, as teachers, as soldiers, and as harem guards. The last point is important because castration of African people, African men, was a very common practice with Arabian slavery. Okay? Muslims, on the other hand, including African Muslims, were not allowed to be enslaved. You see what I'm saying? Which is an interesting fact, because whilst they took people and enslaved them, okay, you could rise if you converted to Muslim, to being an Islam, to Islam, okay? Also, a lot of people were enslaved in the military. Okay, and you could rank, you could have risen in the military as well. In fact, some of noted Arabian generals started off as African slaves themselves. All right, Zanzibar, which is off the coast of Tanzania, okay, was like the hub of this East African slave trade. All right, and there you have a picture of Zanzibar over here. All right, okay, so that is between the 9th and the 19th century. All of this stuff was happening. All right, now in the meantime, all right, you had a lot of competition. This is around the 1500 time. A lot of competition going on between these, the people in the in the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, and France and North Africa. Okay, a lot of competition. So basically, what happened was that the Ottoman Empire controlled most of Egypt and that area there. Yeah, Spain controlled the area between Tlemcen and Oran up there in Algeria. Okay, and Morocco. Sorry, the Portuguese control a large area there in Morocco. All right, and in the beginning, what happened really was these places in Morocco and so on were the end points of the Arabian slave trade. You see what I'm saying? So they were able to control the end points of those slave routes, right? I remember they were trading with people up to Europe even before that, all right? Now, what is also interesting, and Radford, because this may have direct relevance to our own history, was that Portugal and Spain, okay, were conquered by the Berbers, the Moors, okay, and had controlled that area. The Moors are from North Africa, okay, and controlled that area for many centuries, for about 4 or 5 centuries, okay. Africans were in control of Spain and Portugal, okay. The Jews and the Muslims apparently had a very tight relationship, very harmonious, so much so that Jewish people at the time when the Muslims ruled were scholars and academics and ambassadors and so on for the Muslim courts, okay, in Portugal and Spain at the time. And then you had the Crusades, okay, this big battle, and the Christians, right, came and basically expelled the Moors out of Portugal and Spain, and they also expelled the Jews. Okay, that is how a lot of Jewish people ran from Portugal and Spain. All right, the Sephardic Jews, or as they were called, the Spanish Jews as well. All right, so coming back to the story, Spain or Portugal in particular, controlled, a lot of this area here in North Africa. And during the 15th century, they extended that down the coast of North Africa. All right, and basically they made the local population, interested in trade with them. Right, so they basically it was a mutually beneficial relationship in that they traded with the rulers in this area. All right, yeah. So when setting up their trade posts, okay, they saw the permission of the rulers in that area, okay, through various payments and stuff, okay. So you will see, I would use a lot of these graphics here, Okay, and these graphics were painted or drawn at the time of some of these episodes. All right. So this here is a European painting. All this was done in the 1600s. Okay, it shows a European basically trading with Africans at the time, exchange of goods. All right. Um, Elmina, this fort here, which is on this here. Okay, Elmina, all right, was set up by the Portuguese in this whole trading scheme. All right, and this here really is the oldest building south of the Sahara, oldest Europe that's still in existence. This is how it looks today. Okay, and it basically changed hands many times, at least 5 times. All right, between the French and the Swedish and the Portuguese and the Spanish and so on. Okay, this is on the Gulf of Guinea. We will come back to this, as as the discussion goes on. Anyways, so basically, the Portuguese used to carry people as well as gold. Remember the last time we spoke in the first part of the discussion, we spoke about the Ashanti people from Ghana, right? And the amount of gold that they had, okay? Because Ghana really was called the Gold Coast, all right? So they traded in gold, all right? And people took them up to Portugal. And they would exchange all of these things, iron, copper, textiles, etc., with the local rulers there. Okay. All right. Here's another portrait, again by the same guy. All right. European trading with African rulers. Okay, in that time. All right. Yeah. So now all of this trade here really had an effect on the Portuguese economy. Okay, in fact, they had an economic boom, right? And coming along with the economic boom, of course, was increases in prices as well. All right, and they also expanded their fleet, right? They had some major changes in shipping technology at the time, which allowed people like Columbus to sail as far as they did, right? It had something to do with the tides as well. They were able to overcome whatever problems they were having with that. Okay, look at this graph. So in 1492, they made something like 60 million reals at the time. By 1534, somewhat 42 years later, they were making something like 279 million reals just in trade between, this trade that we're seeing here. Good? Now the thing about it is that the stuff that they were trading with the African rulers, they had to get from elsewhere because Portugal really doesn't produce anything. You see what I'm saying? So they had to get all of these, textiles and other things from Belgium, right? They had to get their wood to expand their fleet from Italy. Yeah. As well, they also had a very strict trading policy, trading administration, in that only Portuguese people from Portugal could trade with, they had a whole intricate system of licensing and other things. All right. Now, by 1520, all of this thing came basically tumbling down as it was very burdensome. Okay. Right. And they were unable to supply the African coast with enough goods. Right? Good. So a lot of the people, the rulers there, turned their attention to other people who could supply, who could make the supplies. Okay. So the Portuguese apparatus, it was costly, it was slow. All right. So next you had people from Holland, from England, from France, and so on, who actually making the goods that they trading with, right? Actually trading with the people, and they were able to sell them more cheaply. You see, so that is how the others came on board. All right. And the thing about it is that eventually, as the trade got more burdensome, okay, and as the gold started to get less, the Portuguese turned their attention to agriculture. You see what I'm saying? Right? So now You see these three islands, these three territories over here? Let me just shift this aside a little bit. Okay, the Madeira Islands, okay, the Canaries, Cape Verde, and Sao Tome, okay? These were the first set of places outside of Europe, okay, where Europeans carried African people. You see what I'm saying? Right? And if you were to look at what these things look like today, this is Madeira Island. Okay?
Hey, Roger.
Madeira, yes.
There's a quick question.
Sure.
These people were going there as semi-skilled and skilled artisans. Yes?
They're going where? Europe, you mean?
No, on your last slide, you said they were going there as semi-skilled artisans and domestic servants, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so why are we calling them slaves?
Because that was generally, the term used at the time. Okay.
Okay.
Chattel slavery. Okay. Which is what we know as slavery, right? It's just a different, what should I say? A different level of the same thing. The treatment is, of course.
Okay, let me ask the question or make the statement a little bit differently, right? You're saying that if they went there as a semi-skilled artisan or a domestic servant, that they were not paid,
and they were not free to leave.
So they were not compensated for their labor.
Well, or very minimally so. Okay, and they were not free to leave. This is the whole point.
Okay.
Right?
Freedom. Yeah, the freedom piece. Okay.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Okay. All right. So we were talking about the Madeira Island. So this is what it looks like today. All right. It's about 560 kilometers from Morocco. Right. Notice that when they arrived, they found the place basically uninhabited, but very good for sheep and goat and pigs and so on. Okay, and sugar cane. Sugar cane was introduced to this place in 1425. Okay, there's a very interesting story about the history of sugar cane, which came basically from the East to Asia and the Middle East up to Europe. And it is only really around this time that the Europeans developed this taste for sugar. You see what I'm saying? Previously, they used to use things like honey and other things, all right? But it's only really around this time that they developed this taste for sugar, right? And the Portuguese took great advantage of places like Madeira and these other places to produce sugar for the European market. Okay, Cape Verde. Okay, I showed you guys some pictures of Cape Verde last week. All right, Cape Verde is just a series of 7 islands or so off the coast of Mauritius, Senegal. All right, and the first Africans who were taken there were taken not only for their labor, okay, but for their knowledge of tropical agriculture. You see, because these Portuguese didn't know nothing about tropical agriculture. You see what I'm saying? Okay, and they were also taken there because of their skills in cotton and so on. Okay, so here we have, a Cape Verdean guy, showing some, cotton fabric that is made the traditional way, right? Of, people, how people used to make cloth back in the day. So even now, weaving and spinning techniques are really done, the African way, as done by African people from way back then. All right, then we have, and Curtis might be interested in this, Sao Tome, sorry. Sao Paulo is in Brazil. Okay, here, São Tomé, which is just off the coast of Guinea, is just 2 islands, Sao Tome and Principe is up here. Okay, but these are volcanic islands. And This here is called a volcanic plug. Basically, it's a plug that shoots straight up into basically the sky from flat land. Okay, so this thing here is 6,600 feet high, right? Legend has it that it was only, climbed twice before the Europeans came. Okay, so these are in the southern part of the island. Okay, and if you really look at even today, Sao Tome is basically bush. The island is that. But the rich, fertile soil was excellent for producing sugar. All right, and a lot of African people were brought to Sao Tome. All right. Now, interestingly, a lot of people rebelled against the treatment. So, there's a whole business about revolution and struggle in Sao Tome. Okay, that is for another day. But what is also instructive, Radford, is that a lot of these Sephardic Jews from Spain and Portugal were expelled to Sao Tome. You see what I'm saying? Right? Back in the day. You see? They were expelled to Sao Tome as well as to the Ottoman Empire. Right? In my research, I found a very interesting line from the Sultan in the Ottoman Empire, basically thanking the Christian court for sending the best people back to Turkey. You see what I'm saying? Right? Because they were expelling people pretty much like how Hitler expelled the Jews, right? So in response to that, basically, the Sultan had written, I guess, the people in Rome, the Christian leaders in Rome, thanking them for sending him the best people. Because remember, these people were ambassadors, they were scholars, they were all kinds of different things, in the Muslim dispensation of that general area. Okay. Now, meanwhile, back in the Caribbean, and I guess you guys know some of the story, European conquest was going on in earnest. Okay, and basically the native population of Tainos and others had basically, been wiped out. This year is a statistic, from this, I have to keep moving around this stuff, from the Spanish. Okay, notice that when Columbus arrived in 1492, they found 8 million people in this general area in Cuba, Cuba, Jamaica, Santo Domingo, and Puerto Rico. Okay, by 1542, some 50 years later, after another census was done, they pretty much found only 200 people. Okay, so one might ask the question, why is that? All right, why is that? And I am yet to come to terms with it, but there is something about the mindset of these people, okay, that it's just crazy. All right. Now, according to the testimony of Bartolome de las Casas in 1598, well, these engravings are from 1598. De las Casas is some time before, and this is a testimony to this to the Spanish crown. So here's what he says: and they do this to such a degree that on the island of Hispaniola, of the above 3 million souls that we once saw, today there be no more than 200 of the natives remaining. The island of Cuba, which is as long as from Valladolid to Rome, I don't know where that first place is, today it is almost devoid of population. The island of San Juan, and that of Jamaica, large and well-favored and lovely islands, both have been laid to waste. On the Isles of Lucayos, which is the Bahamas, where there were once 500,000 souls, today there is not a living creature. Okay, all were killed while being brought, and because of being brought to the island of Hispaniola, where the Spaniards saw that their stock of natives of that latter island had come to an end. So this is just a paragraph from his testimony before the Spanish court. Okay, as you know, sometime later, Christopher Columbus was jailed and so on. But the Spanish conquistadors in the Caribbean and Central America were absolutely brutal. Okay, I think this is quite instructive. You notice if you didn't, as a native, if you didn't meet your quota of gold for a particular week, this is what your punishment was, right? Your hand was basically cut off. So these engravings, these are engravings that were actually done in 1598. You understand? These are not modern things, right? You have people being burned to the stake. You have people being strung up alive, you know, right? And this, you know, this his testimony, if you read the testimony, very gruesome. These people every evening used to use these Tainos for sport. Who could cut off whoever had the fastest, or who could disembowel whoever the fastest. That was a sport. Right? No wonder the people, the native people, were killed off in great numbers. Plus, of course, you had smallpox and other diseases which they had no immunity for. Right? That took people in vast numbers as well. Okay.
Roger.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
I'm just curious. You know, usually everything that has happened is predicated on economics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you wonder how come these conquistadors, like, that is their labor force. Like, why would you brutalize it and destroy it?
So this is the unanswered question, Roger. Okay.
Yeah.
Why it is brutalize your product, so that you, in effect, sell broken products. And this is the core question mark behind the African slave experience. If you look at it from another perspective, okay. If you look at it as a totally economic perspective, right? You had people coming to pick up quote unquote products from Africa, yeah. Why it is brutalize that product so that when you get to the Americas to sell that product, you know, that product is totally traumatized. That is the big question. And that speaks to a mindset, okay? A mindset driven to a large extent by, you know, religious convictions. Because a lot of these Europeans, okay, thought that what they were doing was bringing Christianity to these savages, good, and saving their souls, basically. All right, we have some people in the chat box. All right. Okay, so let's push on. All right. So with the wanton destruction of the
succeed.
Okay. But okay, so the first Africans who were brought to the New World, okay, was really because of the endless shortage of labor of native workers. All right, and so they brought people who were in Europe as well as people on the African continent. Okay, so they sort of shifted the trade away from strictly Europe, okay, excuse me, to the Caribbean and North America and South America. So the first people who were brought were called Ladinos, if they were brought from Europe, okay, because they knew Spanish and they knew Portuguese and such, right? I think, and I might be wrong on the pronunciation, Matandas or whatever. People who were brought from Africa were called something different. All right, and yeah, so that's what happened. All right, and so we had the triangular trade happening in earnest. All right, where people were being brought from the west coast of Africa up to the Caribbean, the Caribbean, North America, and South America. And so imagine this, Roger. You have one ship. Okay, let's say that one ship is coming from Portugal, Spain, England, whatever. Okay, that ship is not empty, you know, because that ship is carrying manufactured goods to the rulers in this area. Yes, picking up human cargo, carrying them across the Atlantic, okay, to the Caribbean and so on, filling up with sugar and tobacco and cotton and other things, okay, and coming back across the Atlantic up to Europe to disembark there, okay. So you have one ship, and that one ship is full all the time with different cargo.
That's surprising, Roger, because you think they would be dedicated to their roots, you know, like just back and forth, right? And you're saying after they make a trip to Africa, they're on their way to the Caribbean, and then from there they're back to Europe.
To Europe, yes. It was a triangular trade, you know.
Yeah.
Roger.
Okay.
Okay, but they had to make special accommodations to keep people that they couldn't use for other things.
No, it was the same boat. It was the same ship. Okay, right. So they would clear out the slaves. Okay, and put the sugar and so on where the slaves were. You see what I'm saying? Right? Probably get somebody to, you know, to clean down the ship or whatever, and then back up the road. Yeah. So we'll see a little bit about that later on, how the ship was and so on.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. So sugarcane really, I did this a long time ago. I thought it would be useful to put it here really. All right. So this grass, as many of us, is why many of us here today. It started from South Asia. Okay. And from South Asia, it migrated to the Middle East, Iran, and so on, and then moved up to Europe. And that is where the Europeans, you know, acquired their taste for sugar. Prior to that, you know, I guess things were just pretty bland. Or if, you know, you were elite enough, you could enjoy your tea or whatever with honey. Yes, you see. All right. So this grass here, right, is why a lot of us are here now. Okay.
Yes, sir.